Hi, welcome back again. In this video, I'm going to cover the last section of our ETP blueprints, which is preview setting. As you can see, I'm utilizing an empty scene without any default actors such as directional light, skylight, and so on. And I'm going to show you the two sections that the preview setting can provide to you. One of them is mesh and one of them is lighting. But before we go and further to talk about those, as I mentioned in the previous videos, that the important thing is if you're using the ETP for the first time, you need to apply some textures before you enable the real-time preview. So in this case, I'm going to use dummy textures, which is black in this case, T_black, and now we're good to go. So let's enable this. And now you can see it's gone just because it created the preview textures, and as it was black, the final preview is black. But now let's talk about the preview settings. And in this case, since we have no lighting, I'm going to cover the lighting section first. So the first option enables you to add a procedural local point light. And once you enable it, you see that it's actually there. But in our case, since this is an empty level, we need to have a directional light instead. And once you enable it, you will see a directional light, which comes with the clouds and the timing. You have the ability to change the directional light intensity as you like. And remember, they are all procedural. Once you untick them, they will be gone. There is a preset for you to change the time of the day. This is just the artistic touch that I put it here. And another thing is the skylights. But in this case, before we further, I'm going to apply some other texture that we will be able to see them in the action. So there are textures that are samples here that you can use and explore this toolset. So I'm going to apply very random textures, and you see that by just utilizing them, the previews are updating in real time. So now once we have this, the first issue is that the eye adaptation, which is the exposure, are changing based on where we are. And to counterback this issue, you can add a procedural post-process which it will have a constant exposure compensation, and then you can change it to the desires. And in this case, I'm going to put it -0.5. So now the eye adaptation will be constant throughout this level, and there won't be any change if I move around. And the second thing is that I'm going to show you with the calibration tool so we see that those things in the action. So now let's go back to the lighting section and add a procedural point light. We see once I add it, this sphere is lit ready. And then you have the ability to change the intensity, the radius of the light, the color, and offset the location. I'm going to increase a bit more. And the other section is that you can add a skylight as well, which is very important. That's why the color calibration doesn't work properly, because there's no skylight in our scene. And this adds a procedural skylight. And if I get closer, you see that we actually now seeing in the chromatic balls and other of preview of those color calibration. And you have the ability to use a texture cube map as well. For now, what the skylight is capturing is actual environment of what we have. That's why we see the volumetric clouds in there. But in some case, you can actually add a cube texture map. In this case, I'm gonna turn on the engine and use one of those. And once I enable that, you see that the texture cube map in our skylight is there. And let me just use some other textures for you to be able to see. And that's where that you can actually utilize the lighting. So now once we cover the lighting, let's talk about the mesh. So as the name it says, basically it just allows you to customize the preview mesh of this blueprint. By default is cube low poly. And there are some other options for you to choose, which is a plane, which is on the top of that, and then a sphere as well, and so on and forth. And also you can add your custom mesh if you like to. So let's just say for some reason I'm going to use this axis and then you see it comes there. So that's how you can actually utilize this. And there are some additional elements that you can actually use. So I'm going to go back to the low poly cube. And then you are able to change the scale if you like to. And accordingly, everything relation to each other will be increased in terms of scale. And another one is that the custom mesh offsets the axis if you just want to move it around, but this doesn't apply unless you have your custom mesh. So I'm going to put it back to the default value, and I'm just going to bring the gizmo axis again. And then now, if I actually change that, you will see that I'm changing and offsetting that. And accordingly, they are changed. Let's go back. And the next one is that right now you see we are actually hovering in the air, and sometimes it's not nice. It's not pleasing. And also it gives us a wrong idea of what's happening as well. That's why the add best mesh is actually going to fix that issue for you. And now even if I add the local light, we would be it even much more better. I'm going to reduce the intensity a little bit to the default one. So there are two options for your base to be choose, and then you can change the color of that as well to anything that you like to. And there's another one which is very, very good, that if you want a neutral lighting, you can add a background sphere to block all the lighting that it comes from outside of your environment. And when you're actually working with ATP, you'll be able to see the neutral lighting as much as possible. And of course, keep in mind that you need to apply the very neutral settings to the lighting as well. But in this way, you can actually have the background. That's where that is the inverted sphere in this case. And then you have the ability to change the background sphere scale to be smaller for some reason if you like to, and even the color. So in this way, you can block any light that comes from outside and purely focus with the most natural lighting. And that will be all for the preview settings.